We don't see her yet. Awesome. Thank you, Joe, for the great introduction. And I'm sure Ashley will get in any time now. As you know, farming is a tough business. So I'm sure she's out on the farm and maybe finishing up for the day. So when she finishes, she'll join us. So thank you for being with us tonight. And thank you to Fresh Harvest for allowing to showcase their amazing product. You know, without Fresh Harvest and what they're doing for the local farming community, we wouldn't be here tonight. So it's an amazing work that they're doing. And without all of their customers that are supporting farmers throughout Georgia, you're the ones that make it happen by buying the product, utilizing it, and making sure farmers have a way to showcase their great product. So thank you for that. So today we're going to make some great dishes here. We had a list of ingredients that came from Fresh Harvest, and they asked us just to showcase the dishes, utilize them in any way we wanted to, and then we'll explain different ways and different techniques as we go through the class. So today we decided to do a really beautiful potato dish. Of course, being from Ireland myself, you can't go a meal without potatoes. So it made sense to utilize the Georgia potatoes. So you have these beautiful red potatoes. They're a great way to either mash them or roast them. Tonight we're going to be roasting them with the beautiful shiitake mushrooms. We also have some fresh rosemary that's going in there, some local onions, and that's a really great way to showcase these potatoes. They're all around a great size. Of course, you're never going to have them all around the same coming from the farm. So you make sure you wash them first. And what we're going to do is cut them up into about the same size. So anytime you're cooking potatoes, you want them to start off at the same size. So cutting them down to make sure they cook evenly. So you can see here I have a few different sizes. So just to make it easy, I'm using a chef knife. easiest way to do it. Cut it down lengthways, and that gives you a solid place to put the potatoes so they don't roll around. The worst thing that could happen when you're cooking is that you cut yourself. So safety comes first. So here I'm going to cut them lengthways again, and I'm deciding that I'm going to do a pretty large dice. So you can see here they end up roughly the same size. So here you go. And then I'm just going to place them in a metal bowl. And what I do is I like to toss them all together in the bowl. So here's a smaller potato. This one will go half and just once, and that'll get you about the same size. And feel free just to type in questions into the chat box, and we'll go through it. Like Joe said, I am the chef at the Hyatt Regency Atlanta, but I also am the chef at Together with Chefs that myself and my wife started about a year ago when this whole pandemic hit, and we wanted to teach people how to cook at home with no restaurants available for them. So it was a great way for us to get back into the kitchen together and cook alongside each other and have fun. So here you have a metal bowl. Anytime you're roasting potatoes, you want to coat them in oil. That'll make sure that they don't stick in the pan. I like to use a blended oil. Olive oil is a great oil to use. It's high quality, has great flavor, but when you cook with it, you're going to kill a lot of the nutrients. So olive oil is better to use as a finishing oil rather than a cooking oil. So here I have a blended oil. I'm going to drizzle it over the potatoes, and you want it to coat them all. So a nice mix in here. I'm going to add some nice fresh rosemary. That's where you get a lot of that flavor and smell coming from your oven. I've already preset my oven at 450 degrees. You want them to coat on the outside and get nice caramelization and get soft on the inside. So adding in my garlic, that's going to add some wonderful flavor to that dish. And then one item I like to use is an onion. So people always have a tough time cutting onions. You want to take the top and bottom off just by going close to the root and then along the top. And then you go down the side with your knife and you peel off a layer of this onion. So what happens is once the farmers dig up the onions from their garden or from their farm, they need to cure them in their sheds and barns, and that will make sure you get this nice dry layer on the outside, and that helps them to be able to store for a long time. Nothing worse than producing great vegetables and then they end up going bad quickly. So for the farmers to be able to cure the onions and get them dry on the outside, they'll last longer. So here you can see I have the root on the top. Judy Thompson asked what oils you have in your blend. What? So, sorry, a question came in about what kind of blend I'm using. This is a vegetable and canola oil blend. Usually when you go to the grocery store, you'll find on the store like an 80-20% blend. Some of them are a canola / olive oil blend. That's a good one to get because you're adding the flavor of olive oil, but also ensuring that you have good quality. So cutting right through the root. And I'm going to dice these just like the potatoes. So you go down the center and then on nice chunks. I want to have that flavor of the onion. Get the root out. Down again the center. And you're just going to add this into your bowl. Now with this tonight, we're going to cook the shiitakes, but you don't want to add them in at the very start. What would happen is your shiitakes would be overcooked by the time the potatoes are ready. So next step is to season. The most important part of cooking is season as you go. If you season at the very end, that's all you're going to taste. You would only taste the salt. So add salt and pepper as you go, and that'll ensure that you're building and enhancing the flavor. So I always use fresh cracked pepper. That's when you get most flavor. So for those who just joined us, we are starting off with a potato dish, and we're doing a potato and shiitake roast. But in the bowl we have onions, garlic, rosemary, potatoes, salt and pepper, and the oil. And we're just going to toss these together, making sure We get the herbs and the oil all the way around. As you can see here, nicely coated. And I'm just using a very simple baking tray, and I'm going to paste it down evenly. You don't have to spray the pan because you have oil on all of your potatoes and onions. So at this stage, you're ready to go into the oven. We have it at 450 degrees, and we're going to roast this for about 15 minutes before we add the mushrooms in. So into the oven, and I can see that Ashley has joined us. So we're going to catch up with her while we have the potatoes cooking. And Lacey, can you spotlight Ashley and we'll say hello? And Ashley, if you just unmute at the bottom. You're fine, Ashley. I was just telling them all. I was telling them all how hard it is working on the farm, that you'd be in any minute. That's not a problem. So I just want to welcome Ashley Rodgers, the owner of Rodgers Greens and Roots. She has been supporting Fresh Harvest with amazing product for quite a long time. Ashley, would you want to talk a little bit about you and the farm? 7 years? Awesome. Well, when you look at the list from Fresh Harvest and you see Ashley's name, you're going to always have the most amazing product. I've always had great success. And as a chef, when you use fresh, high quality product, it makes your job easy. You don't have to worry about the flavors and enhancing it. We just have to plate great food, and that makes it easy. So, Ashley, thank you. So Ashley will be with us at the end, and she'll be talking a bit more, and you'll be able to ask any questions. You can see she's in above her barn on the farm that she just moved into. I sure can. So here on my board, you can see I have the mushrooms, and these shiitakes are just fantastic, really beautiful, nice shape. You can see they're quite plump. There still has moisture in there, so you have good quality. You really can't use the stem of a mushroom, so you just pull off the stem just like that. They come off quite easily, and you just discard them, or you compost if you like to. And for this dish, I just want to have a nice chunk of mushroom in it. So I think for this size, I'll just cut them into quarters. You get a really nice look, and they'll go in on the potatoes just before they're ready to eat. So just cutting them using a paring knife. When you're cooking at home, you always want to use a tool that you're comfortable with. Don't start with a big, massive knife if you're not comfortable. This one's a nice paring knife, as they call it. Fits really nice in the hand. It's easy to maneuver when you're cutting small vegetables. So that's the tool I'm using here. And then anytime I'm working in the kitchen, I use a plate or a tray to put my mise en place. Mise en place means everything in its place in French. So when you walk into a professional kitchen, we have big coolers with all these displayed ingredients already chopped, and we call it our mise en place. So when I go to the stove to cook, I like to have everything ready and close by. It makes it easier to cook with. So this is what we'll call our mise en place tray. Ahead of time, we got beautiful arugula, and people always wonder, what am I going to do with all this arugula? And it's great in salad, but it has a really wonderful peppery flavor. And when you get so much of it, you can be like, I want to do something different. So tonight we actually made arugula pesto, and it's very much like a pesto. I didn't pronounce it wrong. A pesto usually has nuts in it. This one doesn't. So I took actually the tops of carrots, and when you get the beautiful carrots from Fresh Harvest and they have all these green tops, people don't know what to do with it. They are a little bitter, so utilizing them in something like this with the arugula ends up utilizing them, but a great flavor. So I took my blender ahead of time. Didn't want to be blending with all that sound in the kitchen, but we took the arugula, garlic, olive oil, salt and pepper, and then the carrot tops, blended them all together, and then finished it with a bit of Parmesan cheese. What's wonderful about this, it'll sit in your cooler for 7 to 8 days without going bad. You put it in an airtight container. It's great with pastas. It's great to finish roasted vegetables. And that's what we're going to do tonight. I'm going to roast off the carrots we got, and we're going to finish it with this beautiful arugula pesto. And like Joe mentioned, all these recipes will coming out to you at the end of this. So with that being said, going to get the carrots into the oven while the potatoes are finishing cooking. And I want to talk about the berries. So right now, berries are coming from all over Georgia, blackberries, blueberries. We're about to see peaches coming across. So when we got the box from Fresh Harvest, we weren't expecting the berries. And I was like, okay, what will we do with the berries in this short period of time? So I told him we'd bake one of our favorite cakes. And I see someone who's been in one of my classes on the screen here in front of me. So I know she's used this recipe in multiple different ways, but this is wonderful with peaches in it. It's great to be used with, of course, blackberries, blueberries. You can also do them with pears. But we call this our buttermilk cake. And what you do is it's a very simple blend of butter and sugar, eggs, buttermilk, and flour. We put that into the bottom of the baking tray, and then you lay out your blackberries and blueberries. And we're going to show you how to plate this in a little bit. But it's something that you can make quick and easy and bakes within 20 minutes. So I guarantee you this is a showstopper for any of your events. Okay, we'll move on to the next dish while these are cooking, and these are called hakurei turnips, and these are some of my favorite turnips to eat. They can be eaten raw, shaved, or roasted. So we're going to actually sear them tonight and serve them crunchy, so you don't want to cook them all the way. So you see here, these came from Crystal Organic, which Nicholas does an amazing job growing some wonderful vegetables. So for this, they're pretty good size. You can get them much smaller than this that look like radishes, and sometimes you'll hear them called as radish turnips. But I like to cut them again down so we can cook them all the way. And I'm just going to do these into quarters. And you can see this beautiful white color. You'd never want to mash a beautiful vegetable like this because they're so small and petite. You'd end up ruining the look and the shape of it. So you want to utilize that when you're making these. So what we're going to do tonight, we're going to sear them, and we're going to serve them with some wilted kale and caramelized onions. And then we're going to finish it with due south red pepper jelly, which if you haven't tasted it, is just fantastic. It has a little bit of heat, but it has that beautiful sweetness to it. And due south being from here in Atlanta, and I'm a good friend of the owner, Nick Melvin, and he does amazing with his pickles and all of his other relishes. So good way to use it up. So cutting them into quarter again, and then onto our mise en place tray. You can see the darkness here. That's okay. We'll just put them aside. So cut this in half. See how beautiful white that is? So cutting them down. And if these were smaller, I would leave these just in half and allow you to see that beautiful shape. So if they were smaller, I would leave them just like this. Ashley, you have any comments on the hakurei turnips? Yeah, I think for me as a chef, you would leave a little bit of that green off or green on when you're preparing it. I think the guests like seeing that, and you'll see that in the carrots here when I pull them out of the oven. I think it gives it a good look, and also it has flavor. It's a little more earthy, but it definitely has some flavor. Yeah, and if you get the greens on the turnip, so sometimes the year you'll see the green stems already on there. You can caramelize the hakurei turnips the way they are, have the greens chopped and add them last minute. But because the greens weren't on it, I'm using the kale. So very similar technique, but using the kale instead of the tops of the greens of the turnip. But turnip greens are just delicious. So next up is the onion. We need to cut this into a julienne. And for those who don't know the culinary term, that means a strip. So earlier we diced, and now we're just stripping. So same technique, top and bottom off, down the side and taking that first layer of the onion out. This is the dried part. So just peeling it away. So you can put that into a compost. If you like to make stocks, you can keep the skin for that. So you could keep a whole bag. Lacey likes to keep a Ziploc bag of all the peelings in the freezer, and then she'll make a big batch of stock when you're ready and you have enough trimmings. So if you like to cook, it's a good way to utilize the skins of vegetables. So once again, down the center through the root, taking the root out. Can't really eat that, it gets too tough. That can go into your stock. And then julienne is strips. So keeping your finger back and all the way down. Take your time. Keep your fingers back. So what they'll say in the culinary terms, you do a bear claw. So keep your fingernails back and your knife goes down through the side of your fingers. And then you turn it over when it gets too unstable. And you end up with these really nice strips. Onto my mise en place tray. And then the last thing we need to cut is our kale. So for the kale, depending on the size, there's always different techniques. So this one is a little larger. So you can see here that the stem has gotten too big and it's going to be tough. So it's up to you to decide when you get your vegetables how tough the stem is. When the stem is that big, you definitely want to take it out. And there's many different ways. You can strip it, or you can just take your knife, go down the center, and there you go. The stem is out. So if you're doing it the other way, holding your hand back, and you can see this takes a lot more work. In the kitchen, I would be telling my sous chefs they need to hurry up if they're doing it this way. So it takes a little longer to prepare. So you can see here, pulling back. So at this stage, you want to do what we call a chiffonade, and that's another term for really fine strips. You often hear that used for basil terms. So now if you ever see it in a cookbook, you know what it means. So you roll it up. So if you're doing this with basil, same technique. And then as thin as you can get until you get really nice strips. You would do the same with cabbage. Sometimes you'll see it done with spinach. But you can see how you get this really nice, fine cut. So that's called chiffonade. I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to finish the rest. Any other questions coming through, Lacey?
Do you wash the skin of the onion before you save it for stoppage?
Yeah, so I would wash the skin for sure. So to have an outside layer of dirt, you want to make sure that's off. So before the demo, we had all of ours washed ahead of time. So you can see here, keeping my fingers back, taking my time, and that's more than enough here. And now you might have mentioned the deuce out. That's what it looks like. Really, really delicious item. Great to have at home with cheese, crackers. It's just a great item to keep on hand. Okay, I've already chopped my rosemary, and we're going to get ready to go to the stove, Lacey. So Lacey's going to turn it over to the stove view. And I'm going to gather my oil, salt and pepper. And I'm going to check on my items in the oven. So you can see, I'll pull it out now. So the carrots are looking fantastic. You can see here, beautiful looking carrots. They're starting to get a nice color on them. I've kept the greens on, so it looks really fantastic. And if you could smell through the Zoom call, it just smells so great right now. So we're going to finish that with the pistau later on. Like I said, the pistau is a great to do with pastas. It holds up really well in your refrigerator. It would hold for about 7 to 8 days in the refrigerator. It's a great way to preserve that arugula. So once you get your fresh harvest pack and you have 1 or 2 bunches, you could keep one for salads and turn the other one into this really nice sauce that can be used later on. So I'm just going to get my saute pan on. I like to use a non-stick here. That will help with the hakurei turnips. So turning it on high. I never add my oil until the pan is heated. When you do that, it creates this natural barrier that becomes non-stick. So if you don't own a non-stick, any saute pan would work. You always want to heat it first. So you can see here the pan is heating. Sorry about my camera here. That's the camera you see there. And then the other one I'm looking at. So heating it up, adding our oil now that it's hot. Just a small little drizzle, I would say that's about a tablespoon. And then you're going to place the turnips on the cut side down. That's what's going to create this really nice color. Just going to add them in. And because this dish, you're not going to cook the turnips all the way, going to get them caramelized on each side. And once I add them all in, I'm going to add my seasoning. Like we mentioned earlier, we season at every stage to make sure that you're getting the best flavor. So you don't want to overcrowd your pan. If you do, then you'll end up sweating. And what that means is too much moisture in the pan and you get no color. So if you're ever used to cooking anything like chicken or steak or even scallops at home, when you add too much to the pan and you no longer start getting a nice caramelization and color, it means you've overcrowded that pan and it's stopping from getting color. So I'm adding my salt. Never want to be too afraid to add salt. Now my black pepper. That looks good. And then just using kitchen tongs. You can get these at any good store. That's where we're going to turn them with once they caramelize. Checking on my potatoes. Sometimes they need a little bit of a stir. They're starting to smell wonderful. So now that your turnips are caramelizing, we just pick one up and you test it. So not enough color yet. And that's the best way before. So you can see here, it's starting to caramelize slowly. But I have this on high heat, so it should end up pretty quick. And once we turn them to both sides and caramelize them, we're going to take them out of the pan. We're going to add the onions, garlic, and then add the kale in and start to sweat that down. Then we'll cook it with a little bit of the red pepper jelly and add back in the turnips to finish. So if you're ever in that traditional white and green turnip side that's served, very similar. There you go. You can start to see some color happening. So with parts of our classes, when we teach the classes, we usually do 3 full courses, and we actually provide all the ingredients already prepped, and then we go through the whole menu, and at the end of the class, we actually sit down and eat with those who took the class. So it's a fun way at the end to go do the question and answers and to be able to talk about the dishes they made. So it's a lot of fun. So once you have both sides done, we'll do a quick little chef toss, as they say, and I'll show you how to do that here in a second. When we're training as chefs, you see these guys, they're doing the flip, but when you first start, you just learn by going back and forth in your pan, just like that. And then once you start to feel a lot more comfortable, you lift it up off of it and you go back and forth until you're really comfortable with it. And then you do that little roll, just like that. So that's how you start. Just like everything else, you need to practice. So it's just like flipping pancakes or crepes. You're going to slowly start and then you'll eventually get into the technique. So you can see here, beautiful caramelization on the turnips. I'm going to take them out for a second, just into a bowl to set aside. And this is when we're going to add our onions. This is where your mise en place tray comes in handy. It's right there beside you, and you just add it in. So we're going to cook down the onions. So once again, at this stage, I know I'm going to be repetitive, but you're going to season again. A little bit of pepper. And we're going to allow these to caramelize slightly before we add in the kale. So we can do that. Yeah, so the purple top carrots are a lot harder vegetable. I find them better off to really roast them all the way. So with these turnips, you can actually eat them kind of crunchy. The purple turnips, I like to cook them nearly all the way. I'd like to finish them in the oven. So after I'd done that same technique, I would put them straight into the oven to finish cooking. And then you have the other side of it, the rutabaga. In Ireland, we actually do carrots and rutabaga mashed together. So we peel and dice the carrots and the rutabaga, boil them in salted water, and then mash them together. And that's a really great, that's actually a Christmas dish that we would have at home growing up. And sometimes you'll see it with carrots and parsnips. So adding in the kale now. And because the kale is really fine chiffonade, it won't take very long to cook. You can see how it wilted down really quickly. At this stage, I'm going to add a nice teaspoon of the red pepper jelly. Mix that in, make sure it gets throughout all of it. And that smells so good. So Lacey, we're going to bring it back to and we're going to plate these. Lacey. So you can see here, you end up with this really beautiful greens and turnips. For me, great side dish. You put it right down the center. And like I said, this can be done with any greens. So if you had dinosaur kale, you had turnip greens, collard greens, you'd have to cook much longer, but you could do it. So you cook the greens ahead of time and then serve them. But you can see how beautiful this dish is if you serve this up. The beet greens, you could. Beet greens are a lot more, there's an interesting flavor. You really have to like the beet greens to use them. They have a lot stronger flavor. Not everyone loves them, but you definitely could use them. So at this stage, I would serve a small little ramekin of the red pepper jelly on the side with this dish, and it would be just a great way to dip them into your turnips. So that's your first dish. And while the potatoes are finishing, we're going to plate the other two dishes. We're going to plate the carrots, the cake, so you can see what that would look like. So I'll set that aside. For the carrots, another great side dish that you have. So put the carrots down. Right here. And then you have that wonderful pesto. So stirring it around, and you just drizzle it over the top. And this has the carrot tops in there. Really a wonderful dish. So there you have that one. Yeah, so with the carrots, I saw that question. Someone asked about where the carrots cut in half. So you can see here, I cut them lengthways all the way down through the stem. And then I placed them onto a baking tray with olive oil, or sorry, that was the blended oil, garlic, and chopped rosemary. And I roasted in the oven for 15 minutes until it got this beautiful caramelization, and then just topping it with the pista. We roast them at 450. When you're roasting, you want to get a high heat, get the caramelization, because I don't want the carrots to get mushy. There's nothing worse than having it totally mushy, and it really has very little texture when you're eating it. Food has flavor, smell, and texture, and when you start removing some of them senses, it really changes the dish. So, like mashed potato is supposed to be soft. That's the whole idea. But when you're doing a roasted vegetable like this, you want to have, as the Italians would say, a little al dente to it, a little bite. So checking on my potatoes before we plate. And you'll need to stir these up, make sure, but they're starting to look really nice. We'll add in the mushrooms here in about 2 minutes. So that's them. And Lacey, we're going to plate the cake next. So I'm going to set these aside. And here's the cake we talked about. So once again with this cake, this is a blueberry and blackberry buttermilk cake. Is a great item to make from start to finish. You can make this in no more than a half an hour. So it's easy to get the ingredients together and straight into the oven. 20 minutes at 400 degrees. And like I said, the recipe will come out at the end of this. So for me, go down the center. I think 8s would be good. So what the technique we used here, Lacey had the pan oiled down, and then we coated with a small layer of flour. That's why it's able to come out of that pan really easily. You can see here, but it doesn't affect the final dish. You can see the beautiful pieces of blackberry and blueberry in here. Really a great technique. So for that, I would serve with some nice heavy whipped cream. And I'm going to show you a little chef technique that we went ahead of time and boiled some water. And what they call quenelle. So I need hot water for it to work. And I'm going to take a spoon and get my cream out of the fridge. So I've whipped the cream ahead of time. And what you want to do is put your spoon into the hot water and then just pull it all the way over till you get a beautiful quenelle. And you end up seeing this. And we took some extra blueberries and blackberries from the farm and from the basket. And you end up with this beautiful blueberry and blackberry buttermilk cake. And then just the potatoes to finish. So right now with the minute left, I'm just going to add in your mushrooms. Just sprinkle them on top. Let them roast while we're finishing up the rest. And then I'm going to lay these out. And while that's finishing, we'll see, does anyone have any questions for myself or Ashley? You know what? That's a great question. It's nice to meet you, and it's always great to see a young chef wanting to learn about it. I was 11, and I had joined the Boy Scouts, and would you believe I was a very picky eater, and I didn't trust going away with the Boy Scouts for someone else to cook the meal. So I was like, I better learn how to cook this meal, and so the first dish I learned was Irish stew, which is traditionally with lamb, but we done it with beef, and it was beef with lots of vegetables. You know, Ireland's a very cold country, so stews and broths are very popular. So cooking down that beef for a long time with beautiful carrots and onions and lots of other vegetables and a nice stock. So that was my first dish I learned how to do. And after that, I decided I was going to be a chef. So at the age of 11, I knew that was it for me. So I'm excited to know that you're interested. What's your favorite dish to make? You know, as a chef, we love cake too, so I understand. Well, when you get these recipe for the blackberry and blueberry, we'd love to hear how it worked out for you. Awesome. Anyone else? So the potatoes right now, I'm just waiting for the mushrooms to cook through. It takes anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes. The key with potatoes, never test potatoes with a knife. Because guess what? A knife is sharp and it's going to go through that potato no matter what. We First thing I learned when I went into a professional kitchen, check with a fork. Fork takes a lot harder to go through, and the potatoes are going to be soft when a fork goes through. I was making mashed potatoes for dinner for 300 when I learned that lesson, and I was like 15, and the chef, I was mashing the potatoes, and he said, "Hey, the potatoes are pretty hard." I said, "Well, I checked them," and he said, "With what?" And I said, "The knife." He said, "Of course it went through with the knife." So you learn your lessons, and it'll never happen again. You know, Joe, I've been cooking for many years, and if you saw the small town I grew up in, there's only 500 people, and my mother would go to the grocery store every day of the week. She would go and get her milk every day, get her potatoes every day, and actually, our house is on a farm, so a local farmer used to do the potatoes in our back garden, and it's something that I really care about. So moving to Georgia about 12 years ago, I knew this was part of my culture and what I should do. And I've been very lucky to be able to support so many great farmers here in Georgia throughout my years. At the hotel, we support 76 small businesses in the state, from farmers like Ashley to cheesemakers, Due South, and so on. So we're very proud of what we're doing, and you know, it's important. It's something we should be promoting. We need to help the local economy, and when you buy food that's fresh and in season, it's always going to taste the best. And what you're doing at Fresh Harvest with providing local seasonal um, ingredients that people here in Atlanta can get to their doors, you can't get any better. I hope that answered it, Joe. So potatoes just coming out of the oven. You can see the caramelization on the potatoes here. So you know they're ready. As a chef, I can just use my hand. I would suggest a fork. So same thing here. Great side dish. Any of these dishes will go really well with fresh salmon, chicken, beef. Any of these items will go well. Or you're grilling on the grill in the summertime. So just going straight into a bowl. And then row by row, gave us some really beautiful microgreens. Microgreens, it might be something you like. Well, what am I going to buy the microgreens for? I'm only going to cook at home. But they're not just for show. They always have great flavor. So knowing what type of green you have will add a different flavor to your dish. So you don't just do it for the look, you do it for the flavor also. Never want to add them at the start. They'll just wilt away. But a nice little mix over the top of your potatoes. And you end up with these. I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you can see all of the dishes. And let's see how we're going to get all of them in. And there you have our Hakurai turnip with kale, the roasted red bliss potatoes with the shiitake mushrooms, the beautiful blueberries and blackberries, buttermilk cake, and then the roasted carrots with the arugula and carrot top pesto. So hopefully you enjoyed cooking with us. As I said, all the recipes will be coming out very soon from Fresh Harvest, but we still have time for lots of questions for Ashley, for Joe, myself, and Lacey. And that's what we enjoy doing. We love talking about our passion, whether it's supporting local farmers. Ashley loves talking about her farm and the beautiful stuff they're doing. And of course, I just like talking in general. So it's easy for me. So we'll open it up for anyone who has questions.
We have a question about the blended oil. If you prefer to make it or buy it, or if you have a brand that you like.
So for me, it's just easier to buy at the store, and there's no specific preference. As you go through the different blends, just test them out. The higher the olive oil blend, so if typically an 80-20 means 80% vegetable, 20% olive oil. The higher the olive oil, the more flavor. But once again, from a nutritional standpoint, a lot of that nutrients die once you start adding heat to it. Anytime I'm doing like the pistau, that's extra virgin olive oil because it's not being cooked with. It's a finishing sauce. So you want to use your higher end, higher quality, more expensive oils for finishing, and then the other stuff for cooking with. And also another good tip is olive oil smokes and burns very quickly. So if you're wasting your olive oil in a saute pan and you're trying to get it really hot for, say, scallops or salmon or chicken, it's going to have a higher possibility of going up on fire because that's what oil will do. Once it reaches a higher smoke point, it'll go up on fire on you. Where adding a vegetable to it, that smoke point and temperature goes much higher and you're able to get a higher temp. And that's when you get these beautiful caramelizations like you see on the turnips. Hope that answers the question.
Somebody asked how. Oh, go ahead, Joe. What are those things?
What kind of things, Ashley? What do you grow that you only you like? Ashley, for me, what is the thing you're most excited about coming in the next harvest? Like what are your next ingredients that you're super excited about being able to get to fresh harvest in the next few weeks? So we had a question come in about kohlrabi, some of the favorite things to do with them. I love serving kohlrabi raw. It's great as a slaw, um, has great flavor. It's something that people are put off at because of the look of it, and but it's super easy to work with, especially if it's a younger kohlrabi. You can keep the skin on and just cut it into a nice chop. If I was cooking it, I would just do a quick saute, but in general, I think it's best utilized in slaws and salads. Ashley, anything you've noticed with the kohlrabi? I know you grow some good kohlrabi. Yeah. So like a quick pickle. And you do a beautiful red kohlrabi too, right? That really dark color. And if you ever get a chance going down and seeing Ashley's farm, it's in the most beautiful part of Georgia, looking over to Chattahoochee. And when you see all the stuff growing and all the stuff that her farm hands work on, it's pretty amazing.
I think we have a question for you, Ashley. Do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah. Sounds like another farm dinner, Ashley.
That's what I was thinking.
So it looks like we had a question come in about cabbage, and I think that was sent to me because I'm Irish. We do love our cabbage in Ireland, and one of our favorite pastimes. I love cooking it in many different ways. So traditionally in Ireland, we do boiled ham, and then we would cook the cabbage in it. But with the cabbage that you got, best way to do it, I think, is cut it like the chiffonade, like I just did for the kale. Cook it down with some Pine Street Market bacon. If you haven't had their bacon, they're based in Avondale. I believe, Joe, you carry some of their product. Oh, well, there's a win right there. So you go on Fresh Harvest, you get their Pine Street Market bacon, render down the bacon, add some onions, the cabbage, add a little bit of stock, and just let it cook down. Cabbage, you want to let it cook for a little longer than I did for the kale, but still allow it to have a bit of bite to it. Never forget growing up, my mother would put the ham on and the cabbage would boil for 4 hours and the whole house would smell like cabbage. So it can put you off, but you don't want to cook it that long. But that's one of my favorite ways to do it. And it goes really well served with like a grilled salmon on top. You don't have to do the bacon. If I wasn't doing it vegetarian, I would use probably some small Vidalia onions or a pearl onion or anything like that and put it in there. But cabbage is so great. Let's see, is there any other chat? Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. And we look forward to hopefully doing this again very soon. And of course, Ashley, thank you for all you do and all the great vegetables you're providing. We can make that happen. Bye, everybody. Anyone else has questions, we'll be here for another minute or two if you'd like any questions. Yeah,
You'll just come over. We'll warm it up when you get here.
yeah, that buttermilk cake. That's what I'm gonna have that for dinner. I decided. You know what? We haven't tried, but I bet you can. We've done a lot of our recipes through the class gluten free, and they've always turned out great. Um, we're happy to test it for you, Ashley. We'll get it to you.
Yeah, and this one you don't really mix it for very long, so you could just really kind of fold it in. Be great.
And typically, the King Arthur gluten free flour, that blend works really good with any recipe. Yeah, it's good. And actually, if you go on their website, their recipes for gluten free with their flour works great every time. Still a few more on. Well, if you could smell it, these carrots, they're calling me.
Sounds perfect. Yeah.
And it's cool because you can also see where the farms are, what farms you're utilizing, and eggs and dairy and everything. It's pretty cool. Okay, awesome. Still have a few people on. Anyone who is still on have questions? I know Joe's dying to answer a ton of fresh harvest questions. Joe, tell me this: how do you decide what farms you use? How do you find the farms? Yeah, I got upset when Ashley told me I wasn't her largest customer, and I was like, "Who is it?" And she told me Fresh Harvest. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, we're getting back.
I have a question for Joe. Okay, Joe, I know that all the like, how do you pick from all this amazing produce? But of all of your like the dry goods and staples that you have that you offer every week, what's your favorite? Like you can't go without.
Oof. Ashley's on the call, just so you know.
Not produce, but like dry goods. That's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, so I used their flour when I cooked at the James Beard House a few years ago, with Georgia Grown, and got to utilize their fresh ground flour, which is pretty amazing. They do a good job. Awesome. Well, like we thank you, Jennifer. Go ahead, Kimberly.
That's a good question.
Okay, well, I think that's it for everyone. Thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you all soon. Good night.